you think you would recognize your other half easily, or would you need bold signs? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Love Unexpected, a true story that will take you on a romantic journey that I promise will make you smile, sigh, and believe in the power of love. I'm your host, Tom Howie. This amazing story follows a young woman named Dawn Lawson, who had the experience of a lifetime. She traveled through Poland and Ukraine in 1992, shortly after they had become free from communist control. Her adventure is filled with unexpected turns, twists, and revelations sure to capture your heart and imagination. So let's dive into the story of how she found love that she never expected from across the sea. Thank you for joining us. Off we go. Okay, so now we're up to Saturday, May 23rd, 1992. You are in Kyiv, Ukraine, halfway through your 2-week ministry tour. So what's on the team's agenda for this day?
Well, we were scheduled to do our ministry program at Dynamo Stadium. That's the home of Kyiv's professional soccer team. And they had constructed a small stage that the musicians were going to be on. And that was at the edge of the pitch. And I remember that there was like 20 speakers stacked. I don't know how they got it there, but they were stacked on top of each other on each side of the stage, 20 on one side, like 20 on the other. And that only left a little room for instruments and the musicians and the equipment and the groups of singers that were all going to be up there.
Dancers are always left out of the equation. Where did you dance?
It's true. No more obstacle course, please. Well, we danced on the track that was around the field. So there were 5 of us out there rehearsing Make His Praise Glorious. Again, since it's a track and not a stage, we had to figure out our spacing. And then also, I'd been teaching Trish a dance duet to a song called He'll Find a Way. And so in the extra time that we had that morning, she and I took the opportunity to start rehearsing it.
So at the end of the last episode, we talked about the fact that there was a I like you, do you like me kind of vibe with Willy. So you were trying to avoid him at that point. Were you still trying to avoid him at this point?
Yes, I was, Tom. That internal struggle that you and I were talking about was literally making me exhausted. So avoiding him seemed to be the easiest way just to deal with it. And since the stadium was so big, I could keep my distance from him and stay busy with rehearsal. So while we were out there rehearsing on the track, I saw a familiar face again, and I couldn't believe it. Tom, my Russian friend Olga was there. She was a complete surprise. I had no idea she was coming. But there she was, like just standing there near the track with a small bag of clothes and toiletries in one hand and a purse in the other and a broad smile on her face. And she had taken time off of the ballet to travel by train for over 12 hours from Moscow to Kyiv just to see me.
So this is another ballet friend from Russia, but not Ukraine.
True, yes. She and her husband danced with the Moscow Ballet, and Olga and I had met in Baltimore, Maryland, that December 1990 when the Donetsk Ballet came over and did the Nutcracker. Well, she'd been hired as a guest artist to perform with them, and my parents had fallen in love with her, and they called her their adopted daughter, and she loved my parents, and she called them Mama and Papa, and she still does to this day. And we'd kept in touch through letters, and I told her the dates that we'd be in Kyiv. But again, I had no idea she was coming. It's just a mystery how she found me in the city of 2.5 million people. I hadn't even known we were going to be from day to day in the trip. Tom, it had to be by the hand of God that she found us that day. It truly was a miracle.
It's kind of the second miracle if you count Sergei finding you the day before, and now she finds you today. It's absolutely amazing.
It was an overwhelming blessing for me. So Olga and I just fell into each other's arms. We hugged each other for a long time, and we laughed out of joy because somehow she found me. And I was so surprised that she was here. And so I asked Renya to come and translate for us because Olga didn't speak very much English. And as you know, I had just recently found out on the airplane that my Russian wasn't as great as I had thought it was. So then we went into the locker room where the dancers had their costumes hanging, and I was shivering because, of course, I was cold. And Olga, she's always surprised me with her resourcefulness. She just found some cups. She put a bag of tea into it that she'd pulled out of her purse, and then she pulled out something that looked like a twisted nail and with an electric cord on it. She filled the cups with water, put the nail thing inside of it, plugged it in, and just in a couple of minutes, that little contraption had warmed up the water. And there we were, the three of us, enjoying hot cups of tea, warming ourselves there in the locker room and talking nonstop. About 20 minutes later, I had to get ready to minister, so I asked Richard and Renya to take care of Olga. And they both spoke fluent Russian. So from what I saw, it seemed like they were getting along together well. Gosh, again, Tom, I just can't reiterate that I can't believe it. I mean, just in less than 24 hours, God had surprised me by directing two precious friends hundreds of miles to find me. I felt like another kiss from God was on my heart. And I'm just so grateful that he cares so much about us.
The fact that he is showing you day after day little signposts that redirect your thinking that you're in the exact place you're supposed to be. That is remarkably encouraging.
So a small crowd of people began to come into the stadium for the program. And so Trish and I went to put on our Ukrainian tour t-shirts and our little teal skirts so that we could join the Hebrew dancers during that portion of the program. And then afterwards, we hurried into the locker room and we put on our white Make Us Praise Glorious costumes, and everything went well. It's just that it was a really long day. The program plus the ministry to the individuals afterwards lasted 3 hours that day. After the ministry was over, we grabbed all of our things from the locker room, and Richard and Renya and I talked to Lindsay about Olga's journey here to see me and her sweet, loving heart and her dance ability. And we just asked him if she could join us at the hotel. And he agreed and even let her participate in the tour. Olga climbed on the bus and went with us to the hotel where God had already prepared a place for her by making sure that Trish and I had a 2-bedroom suite with 4 beds. Olga and Trish became buddies right away, and we all just enjoyed settling in there. Instead of our usual cold dinner that evening, the team was treated to a beautiful meal in our hotel's restaurant. Willy met us at our suite and said that Richard and Renya had invited us to sit with them.
So to reiterate for the audience, Richard and Renya are actually Willy's brother and sister-in-law, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So Willy directed Olga and me to a table in a quiet section of the restaurant. It was a table of 4 that was pushed up next to the wall, and Richard and Renya were already sitting on one side of the table, so Olga and I sat on the other. Now, Tom, to understand this next part, you have to picture our seating. I sat with my left side to the wall, and I was sitting across from Renya. Olga sat next to me across from Richard, and then Willy pulled up a chair and sat in the open end of the table between his brother and Olga. And this was perfect seating because the 3 Polish people could all speak fluent Russian and English. So it was nice for us to sit and chat and relax over a nice, hot, delicious dinner after that long, cold day outside. And then at one point, while Richard and Willy were talking to Olga, Renya leaned forward and softly asked, "Why is a nice girl like you not married?" Tom, at the time I was 28, and I'd been asked this question often. In fact, I had just been asked this before I left on the trip by my neighbor. And he asked me why I was still single. And then he proceeded to tell me that at my age, I wouldn't find anyone because all the good men were taken. And that made me really upset. And I told him, so you're trying to tell me that in this whole wide world, there's not one good man left for me? I don't believe it. He's out there somewhere. And now Renya was asking me why I was single too. So over time, Tom, I had found it efficient to create several responses to this question. So I was ready. And I'd even developed like a mental file folder for them. And so whenever the question came up, I would mentally open up that file and lay out all of my reasons as to why I was still single. So that's what I did that night with Renya. And I said these things with total conviction. I told her that a few years ago, I had decided that I'd rather stay single the rest of my life than be married to the wrong man. Because if we're not right for each other, then our relationship isn't going to last and it will end in heartbreak. And I also told her that I know who I am and what God's calling me to do in my life. So because of this, I'm confident I will know my husband when he comes along. And the two of us will be walking down that same path of life with similar goals and passions. But above all, I know for certain that God loves me so much that he wants the best for me. So I'm waiting for God's best choice for me. Tom, I was just about to elaborate more when suddenly I was stopped short. I heard what sounded like a voice of a man speaking into my left ear, the one that was next to the wall. And the voice said very emphatically, "You've been waiting for her brother-in-law." Oh my gosh, Tom, I was almost ready to repeat what I'd heard because it was said with such authority. But then I stopped talking altogether and I tried to make sense of what had just happened. I had never heard the audible voice of God before, but he suddenly interrupted me. God obviously wanted to stop me and make me listen to him. He said I was waiting for her brother-in-law. So I asked myself, had I been so hard-headed and even fighting against God that I missed this? I knew time was short. 1 week of this tour had already gone, and there was only 1 week remaining for me to realize and accept that God just might have more for me on this trip than simply ministering to others.
All right, so you're at dinner with 4 other people.
Mm-hmm.
You never heard the audible voice of God before, but all of a sudden, coming from the side, not where everybody is sitting at the table, you hear a very distinct voice. Did you tell anybody about that?
No, I didn't tell anyone. I was afraid of what I'd heard. I mean, honestly, the voice had been so loud in my ear that I was really surprised that the rest of the table hadn't heard it as well. The voice had said I was waiting for her brother-in-law. But Tom, I barely knew Willy. And was the Heavenly Father wanting me to trust him and marry someone I just met? God had stopped me from talking about my reasons for being single, and I felt my heart change. It seemed like he was softening it so that I could respond to his next revelation. Now, Tom, I had to make a choice, whether I'd let go of my control and my choices or say yes to letting the Lord direct my steps in this. So again, no, I didn't talk to anybody about this. I didn't know who I could talk to about this or even what I would have said. So I just kept quiet until the dinner was over. And when it was, we all left the restaurant. And I was happy to see that Sergey was in the lobby waiting for us at the hotel. Olga and I went up to the room to get the bag of gifts and pictures and letters I had brought from Sergei's wife.
So she was still in Tennessee with your parents, is that right?
Yes. I had also brought a visa application for him to fill out so that he and their daughter could join them in the United States. So Olga, Serge, and I found a cluster of couches and chairs in the upstairs lobby, and we decided to sit there and talk. And Olga sat on the couch next to me, and Serge was in a chair on the other side of me. And he started out by showing us photos of his daughter and the home they were building in Donetsk. And Olga and I just sat there and enjoyed those. And those were actually going back with me to Ella. And then we began to work on the visa application. Well, thankfully, Serge speaks English very well, so he understood the instructions that I was reading. And I looked over sweet Olga. She was just bright-eyed and smiling, but not understanding our conversation. I felt awful. I didn't want her to sit there and be ignored this whole time while I was working with Serge. So I just whispered a prayer. I said, God, I wish there were two of me, one to talk to Serge and one to talk with Olga. And as if on cue, the moment that thought went through my head, Willy walked around the corner into the lobby, headed straight towards Olga, and sat down on the floor in front of her and began talking to her in Russian. Tom, I have to describe what I saw next. Instantly, in my mind, I saw a vision of two empty half circles lying down. And then when Willy sat to talk to Olga, I saw the two halves begin to rise up and come together until they met and created a full circle. And when they clicked together, the circle suddenly turned green. And I was immediately filled with peace that washed from my head and ran through my entire body. I mean, I'd never felt such a sure, a restful, a complete peace before. Those blinders that I had fought so hard to keep on so that I wouldn't get distracted seemed to just fall off my eyes. And I could finally accept that Willy was my other half. And that circle turned green as if God was saying to this relationship, go!
I love that. You look back as well and you say you had all the file folders of excuses to answer the questions. You heard an audible voice, but all of a sudden, everything fell in place and you realized that it was all working together for your good.
But I had to pull my focus back to Serge so that we could finish this paperwork on the visa. And when we were finally done, he took the applications and the packages for his family and the ones for the families of the other dancers that were staying with my parents. And we hugged goodbye, and then he headed out and started his 8-hour drive back home to Donetsk. Well, by this time, there were a few more people from the tour that made their way into the lobby, and they joined Willy and Olga and me. And we were all sitting there sharing snacks and funny stories. And Olga and I were on the couch, and Willy was still sitting on the floor between us with his back against the couch. Then, Tom, I can tell you, this shocked me, but without realizing it, I'd begun to run my fingers through Willy's curls as if he were like a pet dog sitting at my feet. And when I noticed what I was doing, I was so shocked that I quickly pulled my hand away. I apologized and I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I was doing that." And Willy looked at me so sweetly with this big smile and said, "Please continue. It feels good." I was nervous about it, so I was gently, cautiously putting my hand back onto his head, and then I began to comb my fingers through his hair again. And Tom, you know what? It felt so wrong, but at the same time, it just felt so right.
Well, a few minutes ago, you were talking about a note that you found in a pocket of yes or no, do you like me? And it kind of took me back to, fifth grade. But if you've got your hands in his hair and he's saying that feels good, I'm thinking the answer might have been a check in the yes box.
Well, I liked him, but so much still had to happen. As you can imagine, that night, I was completely exhausted and overwhelmed when I went back to my room. God hadn't held back that night. He was asking me to trust him and his choice for me. I mean, isn't that just what I had told Renya I was waiting for? I had no clue what to do now, Tom. So I just wrestled with myself all night, and I finally chose just to let Jesus lead me in this dance. If this was what God had planned for me, then I would say yes to his choice of Willy, even though I didn't love Willy yet. I wished that I'd thought he was handsome or that he was what I'd thought I had always wanted in a husband. Though things were just beginning to settle inside me, I had a lot of questions. Things like, should I talk to Willy about what I heard? How do you start that conversation? Like, hey, so God told me that I've been waiting for you. Do I tell him about the circle and him being my other half? Tom, I didn't know what Willy was feeling. He was attracted to me, but was there more? I didn't know what he was thinking. Was God showing him the same thing? Or was it just me? So as I was laying there in bed, I just decided to pray. Father, I know you love me and you want the best for me. I just need your wisdom. I need to know what to do now. But Tom, I can tell you one thing. There was a lot that was about to happen in the remaining 6.5 days.
That wraps up this season of Love Unexpected. To find out what happens next, please join us early 2024. To see photos and video clips that go along with this episode, go to our website, loveunexpected.us. You can also find a link to our website in our episode guide. We'd love to hear from you, so email us your comments and questions about this episode to our webpage. Again, loveunexpected.us. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love for you to share our podcast with your family and friends. You can listen to Love Unexpected on your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcast. We invite you to follow our social media at Love Unexpected Podcast on both Instagram and Facebook. We look forward to connecting with you. Our producer for this show and creator of original music is Joe E.P. Music. Our host, Tom Howie. Our writer is Dawn Prushkovsky.